with my new Wii U CPU Miis being added, I decided to update this slideshow with the difficulties. And yeah, some Miis got changed to other difficulties as well. So yeah, I'll be going over all these. And yeah. Alright, so first is beginner, which is Adam Anahira Aquamarine, who's inspired by Chica. Blossom, Bow, Canvas, Cobalt, who's a mix of Bernardo and Siobhan. Fadi, Hertz, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me. Juan, Jalong, who's inspired by Nick. I know I already have Hiromi. I don't know why I made Jalong like this. Jian Park, who's inspired by Alice, Jungkook, Kimani, Kamala, who's a mix of Wee, Hiromi, and Patricia. Linda, who's inspired by Yun. Pushta, who kind of looks like Michelle Magnuson's me Derek, although he's not inspired by anyone. Kismat, who's inspired by Xiaojian. Rafiki, who's a mix of Machias and Tatsuaki. Raiden, Rashad, Siri, who's inspired by Eva. Vegito, who's inspired by Libra Warrior 2004's Me Scoot, and Shui Fang. For standard, I have Alice, Anemone, Botan, Brand, Bruno, who's inspired by Vincenzo, Cam, Elena, Hennessy, Anahe, who's the mix of Millie and Takashi, Jan, who's the mix of Michelle Magnuson's Me, Hans, and Zekai, Komorebi, who's a mix of Carlo and Mia from Wii Music, Kyoya, Laren, Love, who's the mix of Ryan and Yuriko, Morgan, Nico, Nawoya, who's inspired by Siobhan, Piper, Shivna, who's inspired by Wee Barbara. I know Shasha is also inspired by Wee Barbara. I don't know why I made him like that. I think he's cool though. Tato, Terhas, and Valenzuela. Yeah. For advanced, I have Alicia, Bede, Brian, Connery, Dunbar, Egypt, Fabio, Fernanda, Jazara, June, Kim, Kyler, Matt, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson, Nguyen, I don't remember how you say this one actually, but he's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me Roy, Chi, Quinn, who's inspired by Wii U Hiromi, Shantae, Siran, who's inspired by Merrick, Ushi, Vincenzo, Xiao Sheng, and Xiao Tong, who's inspired by Naomi. For expert, I have Aaliyah Osk, who's inspired by Paul from Brawl for the Mini DVD player, Belcalis, Bjork, Dolores, who's inspired by Midori, Enrique, who's inspired by Pablo and Hyunwoo, Forrest, Gabrielle, who's a bit inspired by Marie, Goyo, Hawkes, Giu, Joanna, Kumi, who's inspired by Leonie, Layla, Mario, who's inspired by Libra Warrior 2004's Me, Tim, Nezumi, Oscar, Sinead, who's inspired by JD Desi's Me, Stefan, Tempera, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me, Hana, Shao, this is a guy by the way, Shusha, and Ziazan, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me, Marnie. And for Master, I have Alexandro, who's the mix of Crispin from Brawl for the Mini DVD player and Eddie, Katrina, Candace, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me, Scarlet, Kira, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me, Shioki, Ferran, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me, Caesar, Francesca, Gitanjali, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me, Serenity, Yvonne, who's inspired by Yost. Ivo, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me Nolan. Kiki, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me Nayeli. Christian, who's inspired by Anime Katrina 2021's Me. Kyo Lander, who's inspired by Changhan. Madoka. Miko. Patricia, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me Kumi. Pietro Renxiang, who's inspired by Wii U Barbara. Sarah, who's inspired by Jack Jealous's Me Doi. Valentine, who's inspired by Sam Sports Me. Well, Sam the Creator's Me, my bad. Wolfgang, who's inspired by Tyrone. And Shanti, who's inspired by Michelle Magnuson's Me Yuki. And yeah, who is your favorite and least favorite me of each difficulty? Let me know in the comments.